Halloween.
Forever.
All right, Stephen. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you.
Oh, happy St. Patrick's to you too, Brian.
I could tell by that accent you're obviously very Irish.
Very.
Yeah, me too. I'm actually 80% Irish.
Oh yeah, how about that?
Yeah. Well, my grandma, I should say, was 80% Irish. Her name was Iris. Spelling joke. Welcome, boys and ghouls, to a very scary. Wait, that didn't really sound Irish at all. Minisode of Halloween's Forever. I'm Brian.
I'm Steve.
Right as I started, I realized I don't think I know how to do an Irish accent. The only way I can kind of channel one is if I think Lucky, the leprechaun from Lucky Charms. Yeah, I can't really do it. I don't know if I've ever attempted an Irish accent.
Well, hey, now's a good time as any to start.
Yeah,
as
good a time as any.
Just really hammer it home. Because, I mean, we're American. We're not real Irish. So,
right.
It's just do whatever, you can,
I'm not even fake Irish.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
maybe a little bit.
I'm not either. Not in the least.
My mom's side of the family is a little bit Scotch Irish or whatever type of mix of crazy illiterate island people.
Yeah. a mix of Mud Island.
Yeah, pretty much. We are going to, because it is St. Patrick's Day, we're not going to talk necessarily about a St. Patrick's Day horror movie, although I'd be lying if I said we didn't consider it. We are going to talk about an Irish horror movie. This fine eve, we're going to be talking about a film from 2020, which we have mentioned on the podcast before, but have not discussed in any great detail. We're going to talk about Boys from County Hell. Spoiler alert, fun little flick. Enjoy this one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But as always, we got to do some shit at the top of the fucking show, and I got to get some beers in me if I'm going to attempt an Irish accent. Steven, you sipping on a beer or two or three over there?
That sounded alcoholist, Brian. I need to get beers in me before I can be Irish.
Yeah. I got to get a couple in me before I try this accent.
That's some form of racism. Yeah, I'm drinking one, but I'm not in love with it. It's okay.
Okay.
From Rusty Rail out there in the middle of the state.
Sure.
I think it's like Mifflinburg. But I picked up their Wolf King Imperial Stout that's made with coffee.
Yeah.
And me, I like a good coffee stout.
Yeah.
But this one is just way, way, way too bitter. It's just too bitter. It went too far.
Yeah. Is it too bitter for your, gloop glop lactose taste, or is it just flat out bitter? Like hoppy bitter or like a stringent coffee bitter?
It's kind of like both. Like it has it has a hoppy bitterness to it as well as like an astringent coffeeness. Like it's not smooth in the least, and it's supposed to be also an oatmeal stout at the same time. So like you're expecting a much smoother drinking, but it's not. It's
harsh,
just
acrid.
It's harsh and it's acrid, and it's 8.2. So I imagine they just went way too big on their bill and put too much shit in there, and it's just
Sometimes you get a coffee stout that's over attenuated or just a pretty highly attenuated beer, and then that just doesn't mesh with what you're expecting from the beer. I've had plenty of. Once upon a time, I used to brew a ton of coffee beers back in the day, and I used to judge coffee beer, coffee spice, because coffee would fall in like the spice or veg beer back in the day in the BJCP style guidelines. So I would judge that category quite often. And you would get a lot of those. Yeah.
You
get a lot of them that taste like green peppers too. That like weird aldehyde green pepper thing from just picking maybe the improper coffee variety too. No, never a good thing.
Yeah, this one isn't that bad, but this one it does have like just this really like acrid aftertaste that's just sitting in my mouth.
Yeah.
Like I don't, yeah. Yeah, not a home run.
Not a home
wish
run.
I just would have went out and bought a fucking sixer of Guinness instead.
Yeah, I did have a couple 2-tree Guinness last night, and had some fish and chips, and the one thing that I will occasionally, and frankly at some the mental and emotional stress, I will give the Catholic Church or a Catholic Church money in some small capacity whenever they are making fried fish, because they do tend to know how to do that. So we did get a little bit of fried fish from a local spot on Friday. Boy, howdy, it was tasty. And I had a couple 2-tree Guinnesses on Friday night, and then I did yesterday too, because I went and hung out for a few hours, a couple bars in beautiful Zelienople. Ended up over at Burgers. Nice dry Irish stout on draft right now too.
I'm sure.
So I had some Guinnesses and then went over there, and man, theirs is really nice. But that's not what I'm drinking on this evening. I am drinking on a couple of these. I had the amber version of this a couple of weeks ago. I picked up a 15-pack this week of crisp lager from New Trail. So just kind of sipping on that. It's just kind of like a slightly hoppy American lager. Something easy to sip on. Something to crank on. You know what I mean? I'm just going to try to get that to pick up, because it sounds like, talking about cranking, cranking down. But I want it to sound like that a little bit. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I want to draw that comparison between masturbation and drinking beer. So like I'm going to start trying to get that to take. Like I'm cranking down on a couple of these crisp lagers.
You're cranking on your log.
Yes. Thank you for punching that up. It needed punched up a little bit. Cranking on my log.
There.
Yeah, I'm cranking my log. A couple of these crisp loggies. Damn, that's a shirt. Come on. Cranking your log, cranking down on some log. LAG.
Who up cranking on the log?
Yeah. It's nice. It's nice beer. Oh, we got a couple other things we got to do at the top of the show here too. For those of you who joined us last week, wherein we were subjected by our Patreon buddy Dan, made us watch a punishment movie that truly was a punishment in a lot of ways, which was of course Sharkenstein. I almost called it Frankenshark. Nope. Same difference. Sharkenstein. And during that episode, we did draw our 3 potential topics for next week's, not next week, 2 weeks from now's Showdown episode for the beautiful month of April. If you recall, the topics that the spinny old wheel brought up were telekinesis, or what we call that's telekinesis, Kyle, as of course anything with mind control to moving stuff with your brain, horror movies. Not what I really like the ring of this, but we have done this one before, which was non-trad vamps. I'm calling them non-trad vamps, otherwise non-traditional vampires. And lastly, monsters from the deep. And wouldn't you know it, guess what won?
Monsters from the deep.
From the deep. So I like that for April. I like that because we're starting to think about, hey, the weather's breaking, spring has sprung. We're thinking about going out there and dipping our little tootsies in the creek, in the that's how white trash. And my first thought is not in the ocean, not even in a lake, in the creek.
In the ocean.
Right in the creek. Yeah, we're gonna be sitting along the water, drinking some beers by a body of water at some point in the next few months. So let's start thinking about monsters from the deep for our April Showdown episode. If you've got suggestions for monsters from the deep movies, slide on over to our social medias, or perhaps to our email. Right, email, by the way, is halloweensforeverpod@gmail.com. But all the social medias, go check us out. Halloween is Forever. You'll find us on there. They're all fucking cesspools for the most part.
We need a good crick monster. We don't have a good crick monster.
No, we don't really have that much in the way of crick. We have the boggy, the boggy creek, but that's a creek. That ain't a crick.
Yeah, that's Boggy Creek, and it's Bigfoot. It's just big old damn Bigfoot.
It's just, they're all fucking just Bigfoot. The Abominable Snowman, the Sam Squanch. They're all just Bigfoot, right? Different names for Bigfoots.
We need a legit crick monster. Something like, I remember, there's around here you can get like crayfish, you can get mud bugs. We need like a good mud bug fucking movie.
Yeah, we need like it's got like the body of a possum, but the head of a crayfish.
Hell yeah. some, or maybe like a raccoon.
Because they got them really creepy hands. I mean, I think possums do too. But
yeah.
Weird little marsupial hands. But then there's also a second set of like claws, like a crayfish. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that a lot. Well, Dan also brought this up. We do have, of course, the bog hag herself, Meg. She's that's a bog. That's not correct.
It's a different kind of body of water. Dan, you got to get it right.
Yeah. A bog is stagnant. Holy shit, is it stagnant? That might be its most defining characteristic. Yeah. Stagnant, slimy. Crick's fast. It's quick moving. Anyway, if you want to join us over there,
propensity to flood.
Yeah, propensity to flood. Everyone's house is down there. They got to be up on stilts. If you have some suggestions for Monsters from the Deep, slide on into the DMs or send us an email or whatever you feel like doing, and send us some suggestions, because we will be doing this topic, I think, for the second time. Right? Did we establish that?
Yeah, I still can't remember.
We did Humanoids from the Deep, and we did. Well, no,
the gentleman's agreement is we don't do subhumanoids from the deep. That's the gentleman's agreement.
Yeah, because it's too good. It's frankly too good. We love Humanoids from the Deep, so we didn't do that. Yeah, we'll have to go through and remind ourselves what movies are off the table. I think, wasn't that also the one perhaps we established Meg Rails because she just did Jaws or something?
Yeah, I think we also said
or that
Jaws.
Was dark.
I remember the one I did was Piranha 3D.
Okay, you did do Piranha 3D.
Yeah.
What did I do?
I don't know, but you guys didn't pick Piranha 3D. I know you went against Gianna Michaels, and that's what made me mad. Because you're
and honestly, how dare me for doing that to my sweet angel. All right. Also, we got some other fun stuff happening. Just kicked it off, in fact, over on Patreon. Steve, why don't you tell the boys and girls at home how they can find, if they just can't get enough of our fucking voices, what they can find over on Patreon.
So yeah, you go over on the patreon.com/HalloweenIsForever and you sign up, $5 tier, you get all of the things. You can try an introductory tier, but you sign up for the $5 tier, you get all the things.
Don't be a coward. Yeah. I'll say it. Don't be a coward. Yeah. Jump in head first.
But you get on the Discord, like Dan is right now, interacting with the episode live, talking to us, telling us about how you wish Meg was back, how you wish Meg was a crick monster, how you wish Meg had all the things going on in her life, in our life. Get to be brand new head brewer of a big fucking, what is it? It's Athletic Brewing. She's
non-alcoholic brewery. Yeah.
She's a big head brewer there now.
Also, guys, Coward Brewery. Non-alcoholic breweries, Coward Breweries. Don't be a coward. Jump in $5 on the Patreon. Don't drink non-alcoholic beer. That's for cowards too.
That's for quitters. At that point, just start getting into the, everybody's doing the dirty Dr. Peppers now and shit like that. Just do that. Don't drink non.
It's a dirty Dr. Pepper.
If people are just like putting, somebody figured out that it's super great for your blood sugar to put in heavy creamer into Dr. Peppers.
Wait, what? It's super good for your blood sugar?
That's sarcasm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you just drink Dr. Pepper and you just pour heavy cream into it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a brand new thing. People are just like putting a bunch of garbage into sodas, and I don't know. It's come up on my Instagram For You page because I usually like just like recipes for like, whatever.
Sure.
And so now I've been seeing a lot more recipes for these quote dirty drinks, which they're all non-alcoholic, but it's just garbage, like putting syrups. Putting the syrups that usually go into coffees, putting those into soda, like treating sodas like fucking coffee from Dunkin' Donuts, or I've even seen like those Alani drinks.
Yeah.
Like doing dirty versions of those. It's just gross. It's playtime. It's people just doing playtime with their drinks.
What is this? 1950s? What are you going to go down to the soda fountain? You know, while you're at it,
everybody's a soda jerk in 2025.
You can have a fucking egg cream. Who are you?
Oh, egg creams are good.
What are you, George Bailey, working at the soda fucking fountain? Come on, get over yourself. Drink a Dr. Pepper the way God intended, piping hot. Anyway, yeah. So, how the fuck did we get on that topic? I have no idea.
Because we were talking about drinks for cowards.
Oh yeah, drinks for cowards. I thought you were promising to put your own disgusting cocktail mixes on the Patreon, but no, that's not how we got there.
I mean, maybe it's something I get into but you have to find out by signing up. So yeah, you get on the Discord. Maybe you get dirty cocktail drinks. Maybe you get, Lord knows what else, but you definitely get reviews of recos. Yeah,
maybe you get pictures of our red butt cheeks. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Maybe we do feet stuff in 2025. Who fucking knows what's going to happen?
Oh yeah, I can't believe we haven't went down that rabbit hole. You get a free picture of a foot, and then we're not going to tell you whose it is. Might be mine. Might be Steve's.
Not telling you whose it is. You got to guess who got the foot. Also, you get to diagnose what's on the foot.
Yeah, mine's. I've been running a lot. I ran 8 miles today. Jesus Christ.
Ooh.
Ran 8 miles today. My feet are all fucked up and veiny now because I've been running too much.
Well, see, now you're giving it away.
For people. Yeah, I know, but
now you're giving it away.
Yeah, but I think everyone's feet are a little bit veiny. Who knows? We shall see. But also, I feel like, well, it depends what it's in relation to. I imagine, Steve, you have for those of you who have. Well, we couldn't tell from me. I was going to say for those of you who aren't in the Patreon, but you wouldn't be able to tell this either. But Steve's like 8 inches taller than me. So I got to assume your foot's like twice as large as mine.
Dude, my foot.
We've never stood there and put our feet side by side. No. We've never laid on our backs, put our feet up, and interlaced our toes together yet.
No, we have to open a whole different Patreon tier for that.
Yeah.
No, I have fucking rectangles for feet because I wear a size quadruple E 14.
Your feet are much larger than mine. I'm like an 11 and a half, and I have like above average size feet. But once you get into like 14 plus, that's a fucking big foot. Yeah.
But I don't have like weird, gross long toes though, so it's just a rectangle of foot. So yeah,
your foot looks like a shoebox.
Yeah. I have a shoebox. I have shoebox for
straight
feet.
Straight up Frankenstein feet.
And I have to buy shoes that are bigger than that. I just bought a new pair of Adidas Aterix, like hiking boot, whatever. And it's a massive shoe. But hey, it cost me like $100 because they don't usually offer it in a size 14 or 14 and a half.
That's my other friend Brian. He's the same way. He wears size like 14 or 15. And before people bought shoes on the internet, he just used to, because he's had this size feet since he was like in high school. He'd have to go into the store and say, "What do you have in this size?" and then just settle for whatever.
Yeah. Growing up, all I could get is New Balance, and for a long time, New Balance was my company, even if they were known way before they were known as a dad shoe. They were known as just big guy shoe.
Big guy shoes.
Yeah, big guy shoes. Reasonable prices. So yeah, get all that stuff on the Patreon. Get our exclusive pods that we're doing. We just started our new one. We recorded it, and it should be up, available for listenings this week. We are doing The 90s is Forever, where we look at terrible comedies from the 90s, but also they have a little bit of a horror bend to them. So our first episode is on The Silence of the Hams from 1994.
One of the most confounding film just productions I've ever experienced the final product from. But it's a lot of fun. And also, we're going to have the first episode going up for that. But you also get the entire series of Youth Group is Forever, where we talked about a bunch of weird, shitty right-wing propaganda Christian horror movies. And then we did all the Fast and the Furious movies, which to date is by far the most painful thing we've done, at least for me. But you get also the backlogs of all that stuff. So go check it out. It's a lot of fun. All right. I think we got all the housekeeping things at the top of the show out of the way. So we are going to jump into this little flicky. And like I said, we want to do something something for St. Patrick's Day, but perhaps not directly on the nose. So this is a movie that I remember the year it came out, which I was 20 and 20. At the end of the year, when we talked about our favorite movies we watched that year, I think I mentioned this one as like an honorable mention. I think we did like a top 10 list or something. I don't remember exactly. That was maybe the end of the first year we did this, but I had not watched it since then, which again was, better part of 5 years ago. And I immediately got a little deja vu when I looked it up on Letterboxd, because I was like, I remember I didn't know how to say this director's name then, and I still don't. But I think it's Chris Baugh is the way you pronounce it. It's Baugh.
Yeah,
and
that's what I'd go with.
Yeah. And I will say as well, I am slightly disappointed to see that he hasn't directed anything else since this. And I'm not exactly sure why that's the case. He has not directed anything since this. Maybe I'm on Letterboxd right now, so maybe he moved into TV or something like that, or
that's
I hope
possible.
He didn't. Yeah, I hope he didn't keel over or some shit, because it's not showing me that on MTP. Anyway, this is Boys from County Hell, and it looks like he actually directed a short by the same title, which was probably kind of a proof of concept type thing. Way back, a 17-minute short film way back in 2013, and then directed the feature in 2020. And then the only other movie he has on here is, directed by credit, is Bad Day for the Cut, which looks to be a little bit more of like a, crime drama type film as opposed to a horror film. So for his only horror film, his only horror feature, knocked it out of the park as far as I'm concerned. I like this movie. It's a tight movie. You don't necessarily know what's going to always happen next, and good cast. You care about the characters. I liked it the first time I saw it, and spoiler alert, liked it this time as well. Was this your first time watching this?
Yeah, this is the first time I saw it. I think I remember you mentioning it, like you said at the end, because the other movie I remember you mentioning was My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It.
Oh, yes. I forgot about that. I
still haven't seen that one either. But yeah, I was just looking up, because when we were discussing what we were going to do for this episode, our friends over at They Called This a Movie, they did Leprechaun Origins for this week. And I was like, well, we can't just be so like on the nose to do that movie or just any of the Leprechaun movies. Maybe we'll do one next year. But I was like, okay, let's do an actual Irish horror film. Sure. And then I looked up what was Irish, and I was like, oh, Boys from County Hell. I've heard of this. Also, it's the name of a Pogue song that I like. So I was like, yeah, let's fucking do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of forgot about this one until you brought it back up. So I'm excited that you did. This movie has a relatively, I guess, little known cast as far as stateside. Certainly a decent amount of credits for some of the performers on here, but I think most of it does look to be more like UK productions. We have Jack Rowan, who plays Eugene. We have Nigel O'Neill, who plays his dad, Francie, and he has quite a few, he has quite a few credits on here too. And I could have sworn that I had seen him before. I'm not sure what I saw him in. Just at first glance, nothing's popping off the page for me, but he did look a little familiar to me. Yeah,
he also was in Chris Baugh's other film, Bad Day for the Cut. So,
gotcha.
Yeah, he was in that. Maybe you saw him in Vikings, maybe, but I don't know. It seems like he just had a small role in that TV show Vikings. So,
I don't think I watched it, but Louisa Harland as Claire. And then let's see, a few other folks here. We have Frafi, which is the most Irish name I've ever heard in my life, as William. He's in quite a few. He's got a decent amount of credits on here as well. And then we'll mention Michael Hugh, or it could be Huff, as probably Huff as SP. So those are kind of the main cast of characters. Great opening scene. I love this opening scene. I actually kind of forgot this opening scene until I saw the two like elderly people, and I was like, oh crap, I remember this, kind of hooking me right off the bat. The first time I watched it as well, and these characters are I mean, we lead up to this scene one more time, but I don't think we ever even know the names of these characters. But it's an older couple, and they are sitting kind of in the old classic old people orientation of like two like recliner type, easy chairs in front of the TV with their like table. You just imagine them sitting there, eating dinner in front of the television kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Long story short, all of a sudden the woman's nose starts to bleed, and they're like, "Oh no, what's happening?" Her nose starts to bleed, and then the old guy's like, just his eyes start to just gush blood, which is unnerving. And it's really well acted because it's just like, oh, they're both kind of in panic mode, and you just see all this blood just like being, seemingly sucked out of them and across the carpet. You have no idea what the hell's going on here. So we were talking before we jumped on, like we were talking about non-trad vamps. Part of me wants to say this is a non-trad vamp, but because the whole idea is this is the original, origin story of the blood-sucking ghoul that predates, modern vampires, or even what we would think of as traditional vampires, even predates that. So is this the most trad of trad vamps? I'm not sure, but the whole shtick is that this town is famous for the legend that inspired Bram Stoker to write Dracula, and that is kind of like this particular town's claim to fame.
Yeah, and you can look up. It's not a thing that they made up for the film, like this Abhartak, like it does exist. It was a myth before Dracula, and apparently I guess it shows up, according to Wikipedia, it shows up in the origin and history of Irish names in 1870. Okay. So it was probably like a oral history, like an oral myth that was passed down, because Ireland's full of crazy fucking like Celtic, like all kinds of myths and monsters that like we don't get enough of, but we get Samhain is the most famous one we know, because that's what eventually inspires Halloween. Sure. But like they're just full of all kinds of monsters that we don't get enough of.
They love a superstition. They are a superstitious lot, historically speaking.
If any kind of bump in the night immediately becomes just like a new type of monster.
That's a like, so literally, like a tree falls in the forest, it's a goblin. Just assume it's a goblin.
Yeah. There was a guy who was sick for 2 weeks. Oh, that's The Walking Dead.
Yeah. One like turnip kind of was weird shaped. Nope. Vampires infested our town. Let's burn everybody.
The turnips turned weird. We had to carve them in the faces, scared off the vampires, and now that's how you have Halloween.
Yep. Sorry. Now that's our whole life now. This is a really well shot film, I would say. Some not, I'm not going to say it's like the most, interesting cinematography in the world, but it's a really pretty movie to look at.
Yeah.
Production value is great. Good music, some effective musical choices for what they were trying to convey, which it's kind of interesting because this movie starts off, there's a little jokiness. There's a little bit of, kind of jocular attitude between the main crew, but it doesn't read initially, at least, as a, full on kind of black comedy. No. There's like kind of a laugh earlier, which we'll talk about, but then it does quickly establish itself as, more of a black comedy.
Yeah.
And I remember.
Yeah, it's more of like a black comedy in the way of like almost the other Guy Ritchie films, where
Mhm.
like the dialogue is snappy and like
Yeah.
there is like some jokiness in the dialogue, but
Mhm.
it's not like the focus. Like it's not a setup gag.
No, it's not Shaun of the Dead, or even American Werewolf in London. But
Mhm.
I remember feeling the first time, and I felt this way again when I watched it, that it was a little jarring when they did the like comedic the first scene where, and we'll get to it, the character Charlie comes into play, and they kind of establish him as the first kind of like undead, whatever it is, ghoul vampire thing that they come in contact with. It's very much played for a gag.
Mhm.
And I remember that feeling a little jarring the first time, and perhaps less so this time, but it's still, I don't know. I almost wonder whether I would have liked the movie more if they would have just played it a little bit more straight and left it be kind of a black comedy, but not so much so as like to put silly music over that particular scene, which they do. And I forgot to write down what the track is, but it's a radio track. It's a pin drop, but it is, or a needle drop, but it's an interesting choice, and it's meant to be played for laughs, but I don't remember what the track is, but we'll get to that scene here anyway. So, it does center around a pub in this little, rural Irish town. The pub's called the Stoker. So again, this is like the only little claim to fame that this small town has. And it's one of the only reasons why there's even a hint of a tourist industry. So the very first sequence when you meet the whole crew is them kind of grifting some Canadian tourists that want to go out and see, this place that's supposed to be the vampire, its grave, which they call the Cairn. And they take these people out there, and they say like you got to put your ear up to it or whatever to hear the whispers, and then of course they have somebody behind it to jump out and scare them, and they kind of make an ass out of these, and they grift them out of some money, as well.
Yeah.
These Canadian tourists. So we do establish as well that there's a highway, or they're calling a bypass, that's coming through their little town. And this is something that's, the local municipality or whatever approved, and everyone's kind of bummed about it because it's supposed to go right through this field where the Cairn is. And it's a bit of a hot topic amongst the townsfolk because they don't want to lose this one thing that some tourists come through, or that their town is known for. But yeah, we've met the crew at this point, whom we mentioned at the top of the the top of the show here, but I'll go through one more time. It's Eugene, is the kind of the main protagonist, his dad, Francie, and then their friends Claire, SP, and William. And we should mention Claire and William are a couple.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just like charming Irish gens, basically. Like that's
Pretty
the
much
way we can kind of describe them, I think.
It honestly doesn't feel too far off of like Letterkenny. It's just kind of you have three guys drinking in a field, and they're playing pranks, and they're bothering tourists, and because they just rather drink and get a little bit of money than actually give a shit about like what's going on in their life. They're all kind of failures.
Yeah, they ain't got a lot going on. We established pretty early that the relationship between Eugene and his dad is a little strained, especially after Eugene's mom, Francie's. I got the feeling they were divorced before she died, but they don't come right out and say that. But because they talk about that as her house, but it was her family's house. Right. But it did make it seem like maybe they were estranged or divorced or separated before she died. Not that it's that important, but she passed away. They had never talked about it, and the relationship has gotten even more strained since then. Dad's kind of, devolved into being a workaholic, and Eugene has kind of got this, he's in this failure to launch type situation. The dad's contracting business, which he seems to do like like planing and like well, God, the only, what do they call it? He's basically gonna like
Landscape.
level the area. Well, I was going to say terraforming, and neither of us are right, but it's something in that he's basically going to level the entire area where the highway is going to come through. So he's responsible for that portion of the job, like all the earth removal and everything from this particular field. And this field belongs to William and his parents. Nobody knows up until this point, besides, of course, Francie and Eugene, that they got this job, and everyone's going to be pissed at them. But Francie doesn't care. Eugene's obviously concerned. William's family is also getting kicked off their land due to the building of this, so it's kind of elevates the stakes a little bit more. So they're actually kind of being forced to move, and their land is being forcibly bought by whatever the municipality or county or whatever is. Also, William's dad is the town undertaker as well.
Yeah. Undertaker, coroner, medical examiner. Yeah. All the services.
And literally they have like the body freezer, refrigerators, the you see in the movies where they slide out on like they're in their house. Like this is how small of a town we're dealing with here. We get this scene that does certainly come back later where Eugene finds like a skull in this like the like almost this little crypt like basement under the shed of his mom's family's farm where he lives, and he's let this place like completely become dilapidated, and his dad's like always gives him shit about it. Again, it's just like looks like a hoarder situation. It's just a disaster. It's just beer cans everywhere.
Yeah.
Again, he's just kind of a bit of a degen.
That's kind of why I assumed like his parents weren't divorced, but after his mom dies, she leaves Eugene the house specifically. And we kind of learn why Eugene gets the house.
Yeah.
And then I just assumed Eugene decided, that was his time. He's got a free place to live now. Like he doesn't have to, his whole thing is like, he doesn't have to pay rent or anything like that. He just has like, and he's fixing it up, quote, but like, yeah, he doesn't have hot water. He doesn't have, any like real good running electricity in there. He's living,
he's like squatting essentially.
Yeah. He's squatting on his own property.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, he doesn't have to pay rent for it. So yeah. So he can just do little scams and get by and, just have pot noodle and fucking beer as a diet.
Right. Yeah. And pretty much all they do is hang out at the pub, right? That's their lifestyle. William confides at the pub in Eugene that they're going to move to, or he's going to Australia, or at least for a period of time. I don't know if it's just like for work, or he doesn't really get into it, but he's got some opportunity. He wants to go, live in Australia for a period of time. And that's like the whole thing is, hey, he's going to leave. He's going to get out of town because everyone else who just ends up here, it's like this, dead end type of town. And they all talk about how they feel stuck here. And Claire doesn't know yet, or at least they think Claire doesn't know yet at this point. So, but that becomes important later. So they're on their way from the pub, and it's William and Eugene, and William's shit-faced drunk, and he's like, oh, I'm fine, and he's just gonna walk home, like cut through his family's field. And William's like, no, I'll go with you, I'll walk. I'm sorry, Eugene's like, I'll walk with you. They did have a quick earlier, which I didn't mention, a quick Chekhov's bull established earlier. It actually was just in a voiceover, which I'll be honest with you, I didn't love. It was just like when they were driving somewhere, there's just a voiceover that's like, oh, George is William's dad, and it's like, hey, George's bull keeps getting out. Oh, should I, maybe we could help him fix the fence, or I don't know. It's just like really, it's a voiceover while they're driving. You don't even see the conversation of him mentioning a bull keeps getting out. And when it happened, I was like, there's a little foreshadowing. Obviously, something's going to happen with a bull. And it does in this scene. And I almost wish it didn't. I almost wish they just would have went completely out of left field, because this is one of the probably the most memorable, like shocking scene of the movie.
Yeah.
Because they're walking drunk through the field. They're approaching the cairn, and they get into a little bit of a drunken fight where William has some jealousy type of things, because I don't know if he suspects or he has some sort of complex about him thinking his girlfriend Claire is into Eugene, or that they have a thing going. This is something that reoccurs later. And so they get into a little bit of a drunken tussle, and someone gets punched in the face. And then, Eugene ultimately throws William off. William bangs against the cairn, cuts his hand, and some of his blood goes into the rocks. Just then you hear someone scream, "Get out of the field, get out of the field." And you're like, what? Yeah. Wait, what's going on? All of a sudden, out of nowhere, here comes a bull and just smashes William into the cairn and just like gores him to death. And then you quickly see George, who's William's dad, chasing after him. And as this is happening, you see the blood's being like absorbed into the earth around the cairn. So it's this like chaotic scene of William being attacked by, you're like, what? Wait, especially if they wouldn't have mentioned it earlier. I think it would have been great to be like, I mean, literally, we haven't even talked about a bull, and all of a sudden you're being gored to death by a fucking monster in the middle of the woods. Like, so
I didn't hear that line. Either I just wasn't paying attention in that instant, or the line bounced off me, or whatever it was. I didn't hear that line. So it did play that way for me. And I was like, what the fuck? Like,
did you like it, or were you like, that was out of nowhere?
No, I mean, it was out of nowhere, but I kind of liked it, because it was just like, why did that happen? Like my line says, "Random bull is weirdest way to die." And it's like the foreshadowing is really, really quick, in that you hear like the beating of hooves before you hear George yell, "Get out of the field."
Yeah.
And so it's just like, it's that for me, that's all it was. It was just like, what's with the beating of hooves? Like, because the trick becomes, is that diegetic or is that non-diegetic?
Yeah.
Like, am I really hearing an animal at this point, or is it like signaling something else? Like, because the way it was playing for me is, I was like, oh, is like the beating of the hooves like some sort of like signal that vampire is about to jump out of the cairn? Is how it was playing for me. And then out of nowhere, a fucking bull comes and kills that kid. And I was like, oh, no, it was a real bull. I was hearing a real bull.
Yeah, it's a full-on real bull. And it doesn't just gore, it fucking kills him. He's dead. And you think William is going to be one of the main characters in the story. Right. And he's dead within the first, 10 minutes of the movie. Yeah. So snap to, it's William's funeral, and they're all mourning William. And he was kind of the only one of the lot that, felt like he wasn't kind of a fuck up, or less of a fuck up than the rest of them. And he was going to get out of town and blah, blah, blah. Right. So that was that's the whole thing. And now he's dead. And of course, now Eugene is feeling responsible for this, although all he did was offer to walk with him through the field because he didn't have a flashlight. But they go to the pub, and things really start to fall apart, because the pub owner, who's like a friend of theirs, he's blaming Eugene for William's death, and is basically saying you're not welcome here anymore. He also has heard that Eugene and his dad are are responsible for the job that's, going to level the cairn, which is the only reason that there's tourists that come to the pub, and blah, blah, blah. So his relationship with his, community and a lot of his, friends, at least his social center, is kind of falling apart now as well. Then George, who's William's dad, has this kind of, big talk with Eugene. Again, things are just kind of deteriorating quickly, right? Even more so for Eugene. So he just basically goes, well, fuck it. If this town's going to like turn its back on me, like, I don't give a shit, right? I'm going to go, me and my dad are going to go do this job. I'm going to make a little money and then I'm going to fuck off, basically. But no one in the crew wants to actually be the one that tears down the cairn. They have like a backhoe or it was like a front loader. Mm-hmm. And he's like, we don't want to, nobody will do it. Nobody wants to be the one that ultimately is responsible. And Eugene basically says, well, fuck it, I'll do it. Just jumps in there and goes and knocks it down. And there is like a hole of sorts underneath it, but nothing alarming happens, at least initially.
No, it's just, he just has a Tonka Tough fucking temper tantrum because, at this point, like, even as the community's falling down around his ears, the other thing is he kind of just is taking revenge on the cairn for, it's the one kind of monument to his dead friend that he can just exact any kind of, anger out on, because he can't be, he can only be mad at himself, the bull, which is probably dead, and that's it, and the cairn, and that's it. That's it. So get the cairn, hit it.
That would have been great though if he did go Tonka Tough on the bull.
Oh yeah,
you gotta smash the bull with a front loader. That'd been sick. Take revenge on a bull with a front loader. I mean, how cool! Just a front loader versus a bull. That's fun. Like, yeah. So he goes ham on it. So they work throughout the day. And now they're like, hey, we need to hire someone to watch the equipment at night because the whole town's pissed and they're worried somebody's going to like vandalize their work site. So they hire the local, some local dude named Charlie. And, Eugene gives him a bottle of whiskey. And it's like, hey, thanks for doing this. Drink up and hang out all night and, open up the gates in the morning for us, basically. Eugene decides he's going to be the one, he's going to go to Australia now. So once he makes his money from this job, he's off. And we established that Claire knew about William in the first place. She already knew, even though they thought she didn't. It doesn't really matter that much later, but I guess it does a little bit. So Charlie drinking, slugging on some whiskey, hanging out in the little, kind of manager shed, if you will. It's just a little like like a little mobile office type thing you'd see at like a construction site. He's hanging out in there, and all of a sudden he hears a bunch of weird noises, dang old Dracula noises, goes outside. He's like, hey, you guys get the fuck out of here. Just yells threatening things. Great scene of you see like someone like lurking in the shadows behind him while he's talking. It's I think done with a pretty deft hand, which I like. Mm-hmm. It kind of shows it's like very much in the shadows. You could easily miss it.
Yeah, but it's in the shadows. It's out of focus too.
Yes, it's out of focus. So he's outside and you see something like slink into his, little trailer while he's out yelling. And of course he doesn't see it. He goes back in, get an off-screen kill with some blood, splatter across the window. So, okay, Charlie got it. Right. They come back in the morning. Charlie is not there. He hasn't opened the gates, and the rocks are mounted back up on the cairn. And they're like, well, Charlie's fucking with us, or somebody's fucking with us. We don't know where Charlie is. They go around looking for him. Charlie shows back up later, and he's all gooned up. And they're not really sure what's up with Charlie, but he's looking pretty disheveled. He's where they're like asking questions and stuff about him. They're like, all right, well, I'm going to get Charlie. He finds him. He puts him in the truck. And they're like, what the hell happened, Charlie? And he says he has a really good line, which I think he says, something turned in the evening, Eugene, which I thought was a cool line. And then he goes after Eugene, tries to bite him. They crash the van. He gets out. Everyone's all disoriented. What the hell happened? Charlie's gone. All the sight lamps that they have, because it's now dark the following night already. And all the sight lamps go out. And they see Charlie running around the periphery. And I think it's SP. I think his name is like, see, what's he say? He says something about like he's alarmed that Charlie can move that fast, but the way he says it, it was a funny little bit. And this is when I started to see, because there's really not that much of a hint that it's going to be a black comedy up to this point, but all of a sudden it is, because everyone's a little spooked, but then Charlie, they're like looking for him, and I think it's Eugene and Claire are in like a little like storage shed, and Charlie comes in and he's all whacked out, and he accidentally gets impaled on this, like, I don't know what it is, some sort of pole.
Yeah, it looks just like a surveying pole of some sort.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, it literally like rips his heart out of his chest, and it doesn't stop him. Which, and it's an accident, right? And this is kind of like, I guess I never realized this before. I never thought about this before. This is kind of an underappreciated trope. When someone is a zombie, or when someone is a vampire or ghoul or something, the first time you kill a bad guy monster, when you don't quite understand what's happening, it's always an accident.
Yeah,
you know
like
what I mean?
It's kind of an accident in this scene, because Charlie's attacking Claire and Eugene, and like Claire is underneath the table, and then she crawls out and grabs the pole, and Charlie's on top of the table, and Eugene kind of gives him like a rug pull, almost, of like he yanks the table out from underneath him, and that causes Charlie to fall forward onto the pole. So like it's kind of an accident, but also Claire is like sort of defending herself. I don't think it's not a thing where she intended to stab his heart out his back, you know. No, and then that happens. And she's reasonably like upset by it. It's not we're still in the mode of like things are affecting us in a a personal way of like don't do murders.
Shit hasn't fully hit the fan. Yeah, exactly. And like I just feel like I'd love to think, I mean, immediately thought of Shaun of the Dead, when the girl who they think is drunk is in the back garden, and she goes after him, and he shoves her, and she falls onto like the tetherball base or whatever it is.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And they're like, ooh.
Yeah, which is a classic scene. But I would love to like take stock of how many times that happens. I feel like it's a bit of an underappreciated trope that the first zombie, the first vampire, the first whatever is killed by accident during some like comedy of errors type situation.
I wonder how many times it's happened before Shaun of the Dead is my thought, because Shaun of the Dead seems like the real, like, here's an easy way for our protagonists to kill something without being, murderous, and still kind of being, lighthearted and likable.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that, they were one of the first ones to do it. I mean, this movie is, I would say it's safe to say, like heavily influenced by Shaun of the Dead.
Sure.
You get a lot of similar, I mean, even though it's not as jokey, you definitely get a lot of Shaun of the Dead vibes.
Yeah. Well, it's not just the jokiness, but it's the actual like care that they put into the relationships between people in this film is like, which is another like thing that Shaun of the Dead had that makes it better as a comedy, because you actually care about what happens to the characters.
100%. I mean, that's what makes this movie, because otherwise, there's some cool effects. There's like some okay creature stuff, but overall, nothing particularly unique about this movie. But you do care about the characters, so that makes all the difference, obviously.
Yeah.
I wish I would have wrote down what song plays during this sequence, because they impale him, and then he comes back out still fighting them with the whole long pole sticking out of his chest. And I think it's Francie is like steering him around. Maybe it's Eugene. He's steering him around while he's still impaled on the pole, because I think, Francie says something like, "That's my new pole," or something like that, Yeah. I mean,
it's all of them, because it's Francie. Like Francie's doing like tug of war, spinning around with him, and then they all jump on the pole and shove him back down into the hole for the cairn, and then you get this next great image of him Charlie pulling himself up the pole while like staring them down is what's really funny. Is like he's staring at them, so like he's obviously being food motivated like an animal, but still just like pulling himself up in this bizarre ninja warrior feat. Pulling himself up on the pole in which he's impaled on. And that's when they really kind of come to terms with the fact that like something wacky, something wild, something, like they're even, I mean, Francie's trying to justify it. He's like, well, he's pissed drunk and blah, blah, blah. And that's why he didn't feel the pole, and I think it's SP even says like, hey, he's like, I think he's on drugs. And SP's like, well, one time I did the cocaine and I did get into 6 fights that night and didn't feel a thing, kind of thing. So they're like, but then when they see him pulling himself up on the pole, they're like, no, all right. Something bad's happening here. When he's pulling himself up the pole, this is a real like Shaun of the Dead moment, because now they've knocked out the music. Because like you said, they were playing like, I didn't recognize the song, but it is like kind of a goofy tambourine song that's happening. But like, they knock the music out and he's pulling himself up the pole. So all you hear is his body squeaking on the pole as it's pulling up, and just SP's just like, oh, well, what do we do about this now? And then just the well, now, now what? Like, the whole mood kind of shifts, and ultimately they end up like knocking him into the hole. Well, he's crawling himself back up the hole, and Claire just comes over with the front loader and just buries him in a bunch of dirt. But then he is trying to, he's still coming. He's still trying to come through the dirt. And then they end up putting some of the rocks on him, and then that does work. And we find out later is the only way you can kill one of these things is by burying them and then putting the rocks from the original Karn burial site on top, and then they can't get out. So there's like a supernatural angle to what you have to do. They find another worker they had. He's dead too, and his blood is like being sucked out of him, like towards, like, not just into the dirt, but like away from the site. And you can kind of see it getting sucked out of him and pulled in another direction, which we've seen this now a handful of times. They end up going to George's house, William's parents' house, and to call the cops. And we do get a little bit more foreshadowing where they have this old truck that doesn't want to start. So you're like, that truck ain't going to start again at some point. And they go in to call the cops. There's a little funny little sequence with like the local, there's just like one local cop, constable type situation. He's like, doesn't really want to hear what Eugene has to say. So fast forward, and George and William, George knows something that he's not telling them. You did kind of skip over the fact that the reason why they all ran to George's is because the Arbitak's foot kicked out of the ground.
I should mention that. Yeah. I should mention that. Yeah. The Arbitak, which is the original vampire. And it's interesting because it's a vampire in the sense that it drinks blood, right? But it doesn't, it's more driven like a zombie is.
Right.
In that it's more of like a food driven thing. So that's why it's like, it is more of like a ghoul of sorts. It's not, it's by no means like we think of as a traditional vampire. It's also not just a traditional zombie where it's just eating flesh and brains and stuff. It's sucking out blood, and it's doing it in a very supernatural way. So it's not like a virus by any means. And we actually do establish that it's not a virus, and it's not even you get turned by getting bitten. In fact, you get turned by being, attacked, or your blood getting on one of the stones from the cairn, from the burial site. I imagine it's possible if, like, you don't see it in the film, but it's possible the original Arbitak, if he bites you, maybe you turn. Because they say the infection came up from the ground. And so, you imagine the infection comes from the original Arbitak, and
it infected the stones nearby, and so anybody who gets cut by those stones turns into a vampire zombie. Like, that's the other thing, is they become more zombie than anything because they don't have the supernatural power to suck the blood out of people, like, by proximity.
Oh, yes. That's a good point. The Arbitok is the only one that, like, when he is near, blood starts being, like, pulled almost magnetically out of people. So even people who are alive, like, there's a scene they show where it's, like, two completely, complete random red shirts who are, like, just hanging out outside. And one of them had, like, a neck surgery. I forget. He's talking about how he has stitches in his neck, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, blood just gets pulled out of, like, wherever the path of least resistance is. So for those old people with their old stretchy skin, it was just pulling it out of their noses and eyes.
Yeah.
In this instance, it's pulling it out of this guy's neck where he already had stitches, and it, like, pops the stitches open and is pulling it out of his neck. And it's just because the Arbitok is in, let's say 40 feet of them or 60 feet of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it just is like pulling their blood out almost magnetically, in almost a magnetic way. But the other ones who are bitten or cut on the rocks or whatever don't seem to have that same power. So, yeah, we know that George knows something they don't know. He's being a little coy about the whole thing. And then finally, he's like, things kind of come to a head. George pulls because Francie is kind of being his normal, like, gung-ho self. He's like a shoot first, ask questions later guy. And George is like, no, you're not going to do that. And he says to Eugene, like, I'll show you. You want me to show you, like, what's going on here? He just is very vague about it. He's like, you'll never be the same, but if you want to know, I'll show you. If not, you could just basically fuck off. He says he wants to know. So he goes to a room he has in his house, which has, like, bars over it. And it was a room when they played there when they were a kid, they weren't allowed to go into, which they called it the good room, which are like, what? That's creepy. Wait, what the fuck? Why do you have a good room? But it's a room that's, like, got, like, metal bars in it. And sure enough, they go in there. William is in there. He's fully transformed into a crazy ghoul guy, and he can't get out. And they're basically holding him in there until, I guess George and his wife have some aspirations to rectify the problem. His wife also is, like, essentially catatonic. William's mom is essentially, like, catatonic at this point. So we haven't heard her say anything since the funeral. We also see that the Arabak, is that what it's called?
Arbitok.
What is it? Arbitok. It is loose in town, and it's going around, and people are getting, blood pulled out of them and shit like that. It's starting to go out and feed on the townspeople. So time is of the essence a little bit. George, it kind of explains the rules of the Arbitok at this point, and the grave and all the stuff we already talked about. We also learn that George turned Charlie on purpose by like cutting him with the stone. And I think the reason is because he wanted them to chase him off the land and not.
He was doing Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, he was doing Scooby-Doo, basically. Yeah. If it wasn't for those meddling kids, he would have got away with it. But the whole idea was he knew what would happen if they knocked down the cairn, so that he was trying to chase them off his land so he could keep his land and keep the cairn intact and yada, yada.
Yeah. He also was just trying to not move because he didn't want to have to move his damn vampire son either. So yeah,
you got a damn ghoul son. You got he's set up for his ghoul son. So he doesn't want to move to a different school district where they don't have, accommodations for ghouls, that sort of stuff.
He's a special needs student now, and now he can't be just going to any school district. Yeah. There's a bit of dialogue in this before we meet Ghoul William. There is a bit of dialogue that is like it's good. It's good because it gives you a hint. And so it's one of those things you can look back on and go, but when the group first busts into George's house and like they're freaking out and they're, they're picking up the phone and calling the constable and everything. And they're going on about how, they're just going on about a vampire. They're going on about vampires. They're talking about vampires. And George says, we've got enough going on right now. And he said, like, his response to their panic about vampires is in a knowing way, because he knows vampires exist because both his son is a vampire and he turned Charlie. But the way he's trying to get them out of his house is, like, he's just like trying to say, we have enough going on right now, but it's not a denial of like vampires. He's just like, can't you see that my wife is just upset and, we're about to lose our house? Like, it's just good writing in the way that plays out.
Yeah, it's a very well written story, very cohesive, very well written story. I said, there's a couple things like the voiceover of the bull. Like I didn't love that personally, but like overall, it's like a really well paced movie. The motivation is super well established. I feel like that has been a bit of a cheap point for us in some recent movies that we watched. Is like sometimes the motivation just doesn't make sense for certain characters' actions, and like we don't run into any of that messy stuff in this movie. I think it's all just well plotted, but they do come up with this plan because they don't know how to kill him at this point, right? They're not really sure what to do to kill them, so they come up with this plan of Francie, being the meathead that he is like, well, we just cut their fucking heads off, decapitate them. What is he going to grow another head? And they're all like, all right, kind of, that makes sense, I guess. So we're going to try it. So the whole idea is that they are going to essentially build like what do they call it? Like a almost like a bull chute. Speaking of bulls.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It is like a cattle chute of, just for a slaughterhouse.
Yeah. So we're going to have this basically straight path we're going to build from the room to the kitchen, where there's like a blind, turn where the kitchen opens up. So somebody can hide, around the wall with an axe. They can lure William, into the room. We assume they're going to open the gate because he hasn't eaten. He's all fired up. Like George was telling me, he's tried to feed him, and, he's giving him blood and stuff because he's the Undertaker. So, he's got a little bit of, I guess, a decent supply of blood, not consistent with, a regular human, citizen, but he's trying to feed him meat. Like it's not working. He's getting desperate.
We saw that kind of already. Again, I think this is before we know William has turned, but you get like this tense scene of Eugene is in the locker room and he's opening up one of the lockers, and like you assume like, oh no, he's going to pull this sheet back and it's going to be William underneath it. And it's a cow. Like it's a poorly like butchered cow. Yeah. It's a poorly butchered calf of like, probably like 200-pound calf or whatever. But yeah, you're like, why does he have this ripped apart cow in his fucking house? This is weird. So like, again, it's more clues and more, just cleverness of like, so it's show, don't tell. It's simple as that.
Yep. Because he's been trying to feed him blood and it's not been working. So he knows he's hungry, and he knows when he opens up this door, this kind of shoot's going to happen, and Eugene's going to run into the next room, and George is going to be waiting there with the axe to kind of, lop his head off. So all goes relatively according to plan, except for whenever William starts chasing Eugene in the next room, he stops right before he runs into the next room, and he's trying to like antagonize him to come, and he won't. And then the interesting thing is that like Claire has the solution, which she goes, here, just like, trust me, this'll do it. And she holds Eugene's hand. And then so that kind of like further illustrates this bit of animosity that's been between Eugene and William, like below the surface, because they both have feelings for Claire, but also, William and Claire were together, but there's always been this idea that like William was insecure about Claire and Eugene potentially having feelings for each other. And she trusts that this carried through into his, ghoul form, which it did. And it inspired him to like run through. And just as George is about to lop his head off with the axe, all of a sudden there's a gunshot. George gets shot in the arm. And you turn around and it was old catatonic mom. Yep. And she does, classic thing that somebody does, again, quite a common trope in, well, really more in zombie movies, where it's like, oh no, it's still my loved one. And I'm gonna, I can't accept that it's not my loved one anymore. And she thinks she's saving her son by shooting her husband in the arm. And then of course, William turns around and just, slashes her throat and starts munching on her, doing whatever.
Yeah.
But it was a really well executed scene because you have that kind of climactic thing of like the emotional, subtext between William and Eugene, who were best friends since they were little. And now they have this thing between them, which is this girl, but then she understood it maybe better than they did. And all this stuff. And then you're like, wow, that was cool. And then all of a sudden you get the second surprise, which is the mom randomly shooting randomly shooting George.
Yeah.
Just all in all, great scene.
Yeah. And the whole thing with Claire, like taking his hand, like you said, she understands, the situation, the jealousy between the two of them better than they do. It also calls back to how she knew that William was going to leave her to go to Australia.
Yeah.
So like she's well in the know of like the way things are. And even if they're trying to keep her out of the loop, it doesn't matter. She knows. So,
yeah. She's kind of one step ahead of them on the emotionally and, intellectually, I guess too. But
this part coming up, this little chase that they do out of the house, this is kind of the best camera work in the film because it's a lot of fun because it's almost a one shot, but you get this handheld chase cam that follows them out of the house into the truck that won't start, and the camera climbs into the truck with Eugene, but then it exits out the back of the truck when you have Will come out of the house, and then George takes a shot at Will from behind, misses, and hits the truck with the gun. So it's like it's a real quick, chaotic scene, but like you have this really good handheld follow cam that's going all around it, and it's buzzing around kind of like the parking lot of their house. Like it's big enough to be a parking lot for deliveries, because we see the ambulance earlier in the film, but it's still it's still a home as well. But this camera is just buzzing around as all this chaos is going on. It's really good.
Yeah, it's a chaotic scene. It's like shit hits the fan scene. Like the plan has fallen apart, and it could be a confusing scene, but it doesn't. Like the characters are confused, but us as the audience, we can stay kind of on top of everything that's happened because of the really kind of clever camera movement. So good call out. I didn't think about this, but this is probably some of the best cinematography and just overall, like I said, well executed scene. It's not just like shit hits the fan, because sometimes you see that happen in movies and then it almost makes me lose interest a little bit because I'm like I kind of lose track of where they're going, and you're not just teleporting from point A to point B, but truck won't start. And then there's this quick scene where they run inside and George has a gun and he shoots William, which is of course his son, several times. It's not having any effect on William. And George just kind of does a like, all right, from, flips the rifle around or shotgun. I forget what it was, flips it around. And he says like, goodbye, son, or something, because he's just going to off himself, but there's no rounds left. Yeah. So you get the click, and then of course, William, munches George. Yeah. There's a bit of a scramble at this point. Like they eventually get and I missed a note here, but they eventually get William into a coffin. After some struggle, they get William into a coffin and nail him into there because they can't kill him, right? They're not sure how to kill him at this point. So they at least can keep him in a spot where, maybe reduces the risk. This was the thought process, I guess, is like keep him no longer mobile. We can't get to them. They'll like lock him into this coffin by, nailing it shut. But in the process of doing so, I think Eugene's injured and then SP is like mortally wounded.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they have a pretty touching scene of like SP's the one that didn't really want to get out. He was the one who very much not only was kind of trying to talk Eugene out of not leaving town. He had kind of resided to his fate, if you will, to be stuck in this town forever. And now this is the embodiment of him, kind of giving up his future almost. But in this instance, he's kind of at peace with the fact that, like, I think he says something right before he dies, like, at least it wasn't a fucking heart attack or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
And he even says, like, people said I was going to, die, at the pub with a beer in my hand or whatever. And he's like,
he said his dad said he was going to die on the couch in front of the TV with a beer in his hand. So like he is dying exactly how his dad said he would, but the reason is more noble than just being a fucking slouch his entire life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. So they then decide that I forget exactly how they remembered that, or how they learned that they needed to bury William under the rocks.
Isn't it just because they already did it with Charlie? Like it's
did they just kind of come to that realization though? I didn't write down. I forgot how they figured out that was the way they needed to do it.
Yeah, I think it's because when they
I think they did. I think it was like Claire or Eugene just kind of had like an aha moment.
Yeah,
I recall.
Because when they bury Charlie, I believe they can hear him stop struggling is once they put the stones from the cairn on top of him. Yeah. And so they do the same thing with William. They put the stones on top of his casket and they can hear him, stop fighting.
Yep. So they realize two things. One, they need to do this to old Abarak. But also that, where are they going to find him? They know he's kind of went into town, but they realize that the basement or like kind of weird crypt underneath Eugene's mom's house was most likely its like lair. And that's why there's all these bones and remains and stuff down there. Mm-hmm. They also, and also like he was sucking blood from the town down there, basically. Yeah. So it was almost like there was like a pipe, like part of an old like sewer system that he was like literally sucking people's blood through. It was like his personal, long draw draft system from town to just suck blood out of people down to his dude bro ghoul cave down in the cellar.
It was his own Straub never ending tap.
Yeah. I was going to use that analogy, but I was like, no one's going to know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Who cares? One other person. The listeners in Pittsburgh get it. Everybody else can go fuck themselves.
So they lure him to the house, to Eugene's mom's house, and there's this touching scene of Eugene and Francie, and they're looking at pictures of I didn't write down her name, but Eugene's mom, And I missed this, and I meant to go back and look, but I ran out of time. There's a last name that is established with the legend.
Yeah.
And we learn that was essentially where his mom, Eugene's mom, descended from this family, which I think was the family that first put it, the Abarak underground and covered it up and like trapped it. So long story short, Eugene is the, descendant of the, Van Helsing of, whatever century Ireland that this was originally supposed to have happened in.
Yeah. The lore is that it was the O'Cahan or the Catane clan. And then, they was the first kind of chieftain of that clan that buried the Arbitaw. And then, let's see.
Arbitaw. I kept calling it Abernack or something.
It doesn't matter. I'm probably doing it wrong too. It doesn't matter. It's, you gotta really know your Gaelic to actually fucking pronounce a lot of this shit. Like, but, so apparently it's like the surname has split a whole bunch of different ways. And so like it breaks down to O'Cahan, Cahan, O'Kane, Kane, O'Keen, Keen, so like it's a whole bunch of different, but the original Catane or whatever was and this is all like, the actual lore that they're including. So like, you can look that up and have fun and read about it. But and
they ultimately are the ones responsible for imprisoning the Arborio into the Arborio, the Aberdeen,
Hey, look here, Irish people, you and your damn Pokemon names for all your damn different Goo-Gaws and Goobly Goblins.
Well, it's evolved for me into, it's now like an Italian name. Like it's now
Abatosa.
So he should, he's the chosen one, if you will, at this point. So, but they decide that they're going to like lure him into the sun, because they're like, well, the sun has got to do it, because if there's one thing we know about vampire lore, it's the sun's going to kill him. That doesn't work. And eventually they lure him down into, the cellar. At this point, during the escape, Francie was seriously wounded. In fact, it was the Arborio himself who wailed on Francie's leg with an axe, I think. So he's in bad. He's got bones sticking out. His leg's in a bad spot. It's hanging on by a thread here at this point.
Yeah.
So they lure him down into the cellar at Eugene's mom's house, and they're kind of trapped. They found his little spot where he's got his, eternal tap of blood from town. And you're like, this is definitely his spot. And the vampires kind of got him trapped a little bit. And he's like, they don't have any weapon. They're looking around for a weapon, something he can go after him with. This is a bold decision.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I don't like it, but he can't get out, and they're very much trapped in this little like cement area. And the vampire is, coming around the corner. The Arbuckles floating around on the other side.
There you go, Arbuckle. Stick with that.
Yeah. He's swinging something against the wall. They're like, we're trapped. We don't have anywhere to go. And the only thing they can think to do, which is frankly just a wild thing to even think of, but then to also execute, is, and also to suggest, Francie, we're like, we need a weapon. We need something that I can kind of weaken him with so that we can bury him, beat his ass, because he's not really super strong necessarily. Right. So if we can just beat his ass, cover him with, these rocks, which we'll get to in a second. I take a little bit of exception to what happens next here, but he Francie's solution is, why not use my bone, my leg bone that's sticking out? And Eugene's like, I couldn't use your leg bone. There's got to be something. And Francie's like, no, that's their only option is you need to rip my already partially severed leg, rip it off, and attack the ghoul with my severed leg. Which feels pretty Evil Dead. Feels like a pretty Evil Dead move here.
Yeah.
But that is exactly what he does. He's screaming, yelling, rips his dad's leg off, stabs the Arbuckle right through the, I forget if it's the chest or the face. I think it's through the chest.
It's through the chest, yeah.
Yeah. With the severed like shin bone with the entire lower calf and foot attached. And then he's got it stabbed on its back. They have already, by the way, decapitated it once, which I didn't mention. And we established that it will literally just grow a head back. Like, you can't kill it that way.
Yeah, the head will roll back to it and reattach.
So it's they know this is only a means by which to like temporarily incapacitate it. But that is precisely what they do. And he starts burying it with all this dirt. But then also, did we know that a bunch of the burial rocks were in the little pipe there that it was drinking blood out of?
Now, see, I think this is where it's okay, because Eugene is part of the bloodline of the chieftains.
Okay, so he can make his own new burial site is what we're establishing.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where the rocks come from, just as long as like he kind of touches the stones and throws them down.
He's the guy. Okay, fair enough. I was, because at first time I watched this, I was like, wait, doesn't he need special stones? Why were some of the special stones in the pipe? You know what I mean? But yeah, okay. So it's not that the stones are special; it's that he's the one who has to do it, and if he doesn't do it, then somebody else needs to use, special Campton stones or whatever.
Yeah. No, I think just as long as it's somebody from that bloodline.
Gotcha. So he does in fact bury him down there, and yeah, great. So he's now dead and buried under these rocks and as trapped as he's going to be for the time being. So he can't regenerate or whatever while he's under these rocks. Interestingly enough, the people who have been drained or were in the process of being drained in town all just pop back up.
Mm-hmm.
At least the ones we see, which I thought was interesting. I would imagine there are some people who have been, drained too much and don't have enough blood to, unless somebody hurries up and goes and gets them a cookie and an orange juice. I don't know that they're gonna recover from losing that much blood, but they do all kind of pop back up. Now, that this obviously wouldn't count people who've been full on killed. Like William ain't gonna pop back up, right? No. He's dead.
Yeah.
Well, he's dead from a bull anyway. He's not even dead from the vampire.
William's all kinds of dead for different reasons.
Spontaneous bull attack.
Yeah. George is probably dead for good, and the wife is dead because they were attacked by William. So yeah. But we see a lot of other people on the street popping up, and Claire ran her mom out of town on the bulldozer. And Claire's mom's fine. So we get all that.
And then we cut to, it's months. I think it's 2 months later, 6 months later, I forget, something like that.
Yeah, it's
months later.
Months later.
Claire's the one leaving now. So I keep calling him William. Eugene is staying put apparently. Claire's the one leaving, and she's leaving for a year. I don't know if we established where she's leaving to.
She's going to Australia. Because I think he said, he says something along the lines of "show the Aussies how we do it," and then she says, and Eugene also makes mention that he's going to learn how to cook, and she says, "I'm going to spend a year dodging spiders and snakes just to come back and die from your filthy cooking."
Yeah. And we also have established that Eugene has finally taken some initiative to actually properly fix up his family home, and his dad's also helping him. So we know Francie survived. He's got, I think he refers to himself as a peg leg, but he's his old kind of self, but he's got, there seems to be a little bit better relationship between them, and they're working to fix up the family home. And we do get a scene of, now, what was the significance? I missed this again. I was going to go back, but I didn't have time, of the final stone. It's some sort of weirdly shaped something that Francie left in a bucket for him from the house, and Eugene puts it on the top of the new, cairn that is in his shed.
Yeah, I don't know if it was particularly significant, other than like it came from the house, and it was just like part of the, it was just part of the house before. So it's still the old stonework, and maybe the original house was used kind of as the original grave site. Depends on how deep they're going into the lore with this, because there's like in the original lore, they had to bury the thing like 3 times before they got it right. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe we're seeing in this story, we're seeing the 3rd burial. And like it was buried 1 time under the mom's house, and then it wound up getting buried out in the field and then resurrected. And then now this is the 3rd time they're burying it. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I think it was just because it was part of the old original house that now it goes on top of the pile.
Yeah. Yeah. Some symbolic element of the kind of final stone on top of the cairn being placed, by something in the house. That makes sense. And that's it. And that's where we wrap up the Boys from County Hell. Like I said, I would be intrigued to check out, anything else from this director. I don't really know the how this movie did, or whether it saw any type of significant return, or like what the future of the director looks like. But I mean, as far as a first horror feature, I feel like he knocked it out of the park. Memorable movie. Again, I've seen it twice, enjoyed it both times, and I'd watch something else by him.
So apparently after this movie, he did a TV show. So you were right when you called that, where you said, hey, I don't know if he's done a movie since, but he's done a TV show. And you know how UK TV shows are, where they're like limited engagement. So this is, it only has 9 episodes, but it went from 2022 to 2024. It's called Wreck. And Eugene is in it as a character, but not Eugene as a character, but the actor.
Yeah.
Is in it.
Right.
But yeah, it says a young man joins the crew of a cruise ship to investigate the disappearance of his sister. But the trailer video that I'm just watching looks like a slasher film. Like there's literally a guy in a Donald Duck mask with a knife.
All right. What's it called again? Wrecked?
Yeah, Wreck. And it's on Hulu. It's on Hulu.
All right. Well, we'll check it out. I'll check it out. 9 episodes. I can deal with that. Slasher on a cruise ship?
That's what it looks like. Yeah. I
like all that.
It's a duck. Yeah. It's kind of like New York Ripper. From what I'm gleaning, is that it's a duck chasing.
Oh, wow. And also with the it's giving me Sweet Alice vibes too. Maybe it's the raincoat. That looks fun.
Yeah,
really weird duck mask. What I was expecting. It's a duck mask, almost like a Chuck E. Cheese, like a Charles Entertainment Cheese type of duck mask, as opposed to, I was imagining when you said duck mask, I was imagining like a Halloween mask kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, no, it's like a full on like. You ever see the game Hotline Miami?
Yeah,
it's like kind of like that almost.
Yeah, I was gonna say, oh boy, I just had a reference that I completely blanked on now. Yeah, that's kind of creepy. I like that. All right. That is Boys from County Hell. Check it out. It's currently streaming on Shudder. Streaming a bunch of places, but hey, if you don't have a Shudder subscription, worth a try. Go over there, and they've got a lot of good stuff. Always got good stuff over there. Mm-hmm. Okie dokie. And also, don't forget, besides going over and checking things out over on the Patreon, patreon.com/Halloween's Forever, send us some suggestions for Monsters from the Deep. We are we're going a couple. Speaking of deep, we're going a little deeper than we did last time because we already have done this topic. So we're gonna have to peel back a couple more layers of the onion here to find some fun ones. So if you got suggestions, slide over to the DMs or send us an email on halloweensforeverpod@gmail.com if you got something you want to talk to us about. Anything else, Stephen, before we wrap up this Bitchin' Minisode?
Yeah, I wanted to just go back to our original Monsters of the Deep. So I did Piranha 3D. You did the host, and Meg did Deepest Bluest. My hat is like a shark's fin. Deep Blue Sea. That's it. Deepest Bluest.
My hat is in fact like a shark's fin. I forgot about that. That was a fun episode.
Yeah.
And
that's
did I win?
You might have won. Yeah, I think you won because it's the host. Yeah. How does that not beat?
I was going to say, how the fuck did I? There's no way I lost.
Yeah.
Too. And I like both of those movies.
Yeah.
But I remember really, liking Piranha 3D more than I remembered. Deep Blue Sea is Deep Blue Sea. But yeah, obviously the host is the best movie there.
I think that the real charm of that episode is that Meg learns that Deep Blue Sea is a lot of like Christian themes in it. It's like things that she didn't know about because she grew up very secular, and so she got to learn about all the Christian lore and prophecy that we started injecting into that film.
That was a very common early theme in early episodes. Is us teaching Meg about how Christian propaganda makes its way into all Hollywood features.
Yeah.
Forever, especially in the 90s.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you've got some suggestions outside of that, let us know. Again, gentleman's agreement. We're not going to do humanoids from the deep, but we got some other ones. I'm excited. I'm going to do a little research here before I go to bed, figure out some options here for us. So, all right. Is that it? Anything else I'm forgetting?
No, I think I'm also just going to go back and check out this Chris Baugh's other film, Bad Day for the Cut, where it seems like a revenge film that has the guy who plays Francie in this film, but he goes out on like a revenge. I like Francie in this film. Like, he's a very interesting, like, just no nonsense, and he's kind of like the last to acknowledge that they're being attacked by vampires in this film. So it's just very funny. And then he has some other things that come up later, like when they're in the house together and Eugene's bleeding from the arm and because the blood's getting sucked out of both of them. And then Francie just has a little bit of trickle out the side of his ear that he plugs up with a piece of toilet paper.
He sticks in his ear. Yeah.
He's just like, that's it.
Yeah, he's a great character. I liked him a lot. I swear he looks so familiar. I think he just looks like somebody else. He looks very familiar, but all right. Well, with that being said, for the Halloween's Forever crew, I'm Brian.
And I'm the Arbitalk.
The Arbuckle. Excuse me.
Arbuckle.
We don't want the Celts on our ass. It's the Arbuckle. All right, bye.
Bye.